You're listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. From our studios come special guests and netball commentary, exclusively on YouTube.
G'day listeners and welcome again to the 3 Feet Radio Show. It's been a little while since we've been on air, but joining me in the studio today is my co-host, Luke Herbert. G'day, Luke.
G'day, Ben, and I've been staying out of the rain. Here in the deep south, we've had about one fine day in 2 weeks.
Well, it's been pretty wet here, and I've been trying to stay nice and dry, so you may hear a little bit nasally, but I'm getting there, I'm getting better, and we'll be all right to go. But it's just going to be you and I today, Luke, but something different, and we're going to review the ANZ Championship in mid-season mode, aren't we?
We are, and we're also going to look at the new competition starting in New Zealand and Australia next year, since the ANZ Championship will be wound up at the end of this season.
Yeah, we are. And just to get things going, first of all, Luke, how do you feel about the ANZ Championship splitting up? And do you think it's because the New Zealand sides haven't necessarily been as competitive, and only one New Zealand side has won the ANZ Championship in their competition's history?
I have mixed feelings. Purely as a netball fan, I will miss seeing the Australian teams because they added some spice and a lot of variety to the competition, and you got to see some very good players. But to answer your question, certainly I think the way the Kiwi sides were so uncompetitive is a factor in the breakup of the ANZ Championship, because ultimately it's come out in the wash that the games that had the highest TV viewership on either side of the ditch involved local sides. So in other words, the games in New Zealand that people watch the most on Sky were the Kiwi sides playing each other. The Trans-Tasman games didn't really rate that well. And you'd have to think that the Kiwi sides copping a hiding regularly did nothing to encourage viewers to tune in.
So you think it comes down purely to TV numbers? I know here the TV picked up with the Foxtel, but at the same time too, only having one free-to-air game a week in Australia has maybe set it back a bit too, Luke. And I think Sky TV as well is also another issue that we'll touch on soon too.
Well, yeah, we'll come back to Sky in a moment. I think there are other factors too. Netball Australia would have been willing to continue the ANZ Championship if New Zealand dropped the side, and that was never going to be on the cards. And, you kind of had a problem too. Sky, for the entire time of the ANZ Championship, or length of the competition, has provided most of the funding, and the Australian broadcasters have quite frankly put in peanut. This is why, beyond geographical representation, no Kiwi side was ever going to get dropped. And it also would have made funding the new teams that you will get to in a moment very difficult, because there's no way Sky TV was going to fund additional teams in Australia when they weren't going to get the TV ratings.
You're right, Luke, and I think another reason why there was the mooting for it, and it's now happening, the separation of the competition, is because Netball Australia, for a long time, no disrespect to Kate Palmer, who is a supporter of our show and listens all the time. I worked under her for a period. We love Kate. She's great. There wasn't enough done, I think, by Netball Australia to get their own TV deal and have a broadcaster paying them rather than them paying a broadcaster. Because at the moment, it's all done for Netball Australia by Jam TV, which is a production company. And Jam TV essentially are being paid to do it. It's not the other way around. That's an issue too, Luke.
Yeah, well, for the game to grow at the elite level in Australia, it has to grow in the media and broadcast market. So the feeling on the Netball Scoop website that I share too is the concern is that, well, Kate Palmer's done a very good job and has been, good to this show. The concern is that, they may be getting a bit too far ahead of themselves, and the supporters with some of the rule changes they might do, things like the 2-point goal and such like. So hopefully, they still remain respectful to the game while expanding it in Australia. But, Ben, just for the sake of the Kiwi listener that doesn't follow AFL, can you kind of, give them an idea of, what it might be like for Collingwood and the Greater Western Sydney Giants to, sort of own a netball franchise?
Well, I think with the women's AFL coming in next year over here, I mean, it won't be every team in the AFL with a team. It'll be between about 6 to 8 teams, I believe, in that competition. It's good that they're tapping into the women's side of sport too. I mean, women have always been involved in football as supporters, in administration. There's all kinds of different areas that are probably a little bit untapped or ignored in some ways. I think it's good to have the extra teams, particularly in Victoria, because it means that there'll be more opportunities for pathway athletes here. It'll be back to like the good old days of the Commonwealth Bank Trophy when we had the Vixens and the Kestrels. There was 2 teams and more opportunities. But at the same time, too, what I'm worried about is Collingwood will not have the support or very little support of Netball Victoria, who are the governing body of netball in the state, and they run the sport. Yes, Netball Victoria, Netball Australia might be providing support, but by having the governing bodies helping to run the teams, it means there's sharing of resources, finances are all sorted, all that kind of thing. I'm worried about they might get a person in who does have a high-performance sport background, but has very little to no experience in running a netball team. That's what I'm really worried about. But in New South Wales, the Giants have got the full support of Netball New South Wales, I believe, and they're going to try and do the Giants teams and the Swifts teams and run them concurrently, which is interesting. And then in Queensland, after Netball Queensland initially had some issues with having a second team next to the Firebirds, they've said they'll happily support and in some way the Melbourne Storm-based team, which will be run out of the University of the Central Coast, I believe, up there, in conjunction with the Firebirds teams. And you wanted me to explain about the Collingwood and the Giants in their markets. Well, Collingwood is essentially one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sporting club in Australia. Plenty of resources financially and high performance wise. They've won many premierships in the AFL. And the GWS Giants are a start-up team in the AFL. They're trying to tap that Greater Western Sydney market in Sydney. A lot of people say they shouldn't have been introduced, but it'll take time for them to have success. You look at the Sydney Swans when they moved from South Melbourne, which they were known as here, up to Sydney in 1982. It took them nearly 20 years for success, so it could be a long way, but the Giants this year are going pretty good so far, on the field anyway.
I was just going to mention that the Giants are having a pretty good season, and while we don't want to stay too long with AFL, you know, if the Giants make the top 8 this year, and they should, the way they're going, you know, it'll be potentially good omens for the netball franchise they have ties with, because they will have paved the way for an expansion team to get on its feet in a fair amount of time. And you know, and there's no better way of beating out your critics and with success on the field or on the court, is there, Ben?
Not at all, Luke. It'd be like if the tactics came from nowhere and did what everyone didn't expect. But just moving along too, one of the other concerns I have is having 2 live games each week on free-to-air. I mean, yeah, all the other games will be available online. And that's good. That's good that the games can be viewed, and the other games, of course, that are delayed as well, you'll be able to view on TV as well. But the issue I have is 2 live games a week, and they won't even be on the main Channel 9 channel. They'll be on Gem. I mean, Gem is watched, but if you want to have maximum coverage, why aren't you going to have them on the regular Channel 9 channel? It's a little bit perplexing, isn't it, Luke?
Well, again, I think it comes to ratings. I think now that we've had digital TV around for a while, you know, quite a number of years, those extra channels have gone from being sort of a novelty to gaining ratings. And, you know, if when they show sports on those channels they get better ratings, or they think they will get better ratings on them, I think you do have to back that part of the deal. For instance, TVNZ, you know, over here, has a channel called Duke. It's aimed at, you know, male viewers, which isn't very politically correct, but you know, they show AFL games, and you know, if we didn't have the Duke channel, they wouldn't be showing AFL, because they're not going to show it on TV1 or TV2 because it's a niche audience. So, you know, perhaps if the new competition grew beyond a niche audience into more the mainstream, it could hit regular Channel 9. But I just want to move on to the New Zealand competition that will be starting up next year. They're adding a 6th team in Auckland, which has been well documented. Now, I think the first 2 to 3 years of this new competition is going to be pretty rough. The talent pool is going to be diluted further, and let's face it, New Zealand never fielded 5 competitive teams in the ANZ Championship. So even in a separate competition, adding a 6th side is, you know, to start with, it's going to be not too exciting. But after that 2 or 3 years, the BCO National Netball League should be, you know, finding its feet, and there should be vastly improved player and coaching preparation in that competition, and we should see the merging of, you know, high performance programs with the National Netball League as well. So, you know, there are better days ahead for netball at the top level in New Zealand. It's just we're going to have to ride out the next 2-3 years, and hopefully we don't lose too many fans and supporters over it.
You're talking about losing fans and supporters, Luke. You were saying the TV deal isn't that much better in New Zealand with Sky TV.
Well, that's what we're talking about off there. Now, I should point out, for those that don't know, that pay TV in New Zealand has a much higher subscriber base than it does in Australia. It's probably 50 to 60% of people, somewhere around that mark anyway. If I'm miles off, please, leave a comment on the Netball Scoop forum or on our YouTube channel. But that said, if you ask me to choose between TV deals, between solely being on pay TV and the deal that you've just talked about, Ben, with online and free-to-air coverage, I'm going to pick the online and free-to-air coverage every time. However, the commercial reality in New Zealand, as we've discussed, is that the free-to-air networks have nowhere near enough money to compete with Sky in the sporting arena. And Sky now does offer what they call the Fan Pass service, where you can buy, I think it's a day to 3 days or 2 days worth of Sky Sports coverage. It isn't quite yet where it needs to be because they're still behind the 8 ball. You can't yet buy a season of ANZ Championship coverage to watch online, and I think they're going to have to do that eventually. But for now, I think Sky's okay placed. They've been losing a lot of subscribers because of all the services like Netflix, but I suspect they're not the same people that take out subscriptions for Sky Sport. But look, if that doesn't prove to be the case, there's some interesting times ahead for pay TV in New Zealand, and to what effect they'll have on netball, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, this has been coming for a good 5 years. You and I have been talking about this on and off.
Yeah, we have, Luke, and it'll be interesting to see just how the two competitions go. People have said, you've got a final say on how you think it'll go. I've made a couple of points like what I've made to you today. I'm going to wait and see how we go. I'll definitely be putting in for my media pass, and I'll continue to write about the games and cover the issues affecting the games, affecting the sport too. So yeah, I'm going to wait to see how it goes. Just generally, anyway. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think the wait and see approach is very sensible, and I'm waiting for details for Netball New Zealand to release their sort of Champions League style finals sort of format where we'll see teams from overseas, New Zealand teams that have made the finals, and we need more details on that before I can comment. But you mentioned the tactic earlier, and that brings us to, the business end of the ANZ Championship season, which is approaching. So how do you think the Australian Conference is going to go?
The Australian Conference, I can virtually see the Firebirds once again winning it. The Firebirds this year, compared to last year, they've been winning consistently like they were last year. But how they've been doing it, it's been alarming. They've just been going bang, 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 haven't they? It's just been amazing what the Firebirds have been able to do.
Oh, they've only had one loss against the Swifts all season, and not this Saturday, but Saturday week, I will be in Dunedin to watch the Firebirds take on the Steel, and as much as in my heart I want the Steel to beat them, I don't know that it's going to be a tough one. It should be a very good game, though, for the Dunedin crowd.
Yeah, it should be, and especially with the likes of Laura Geitz and various other players across the Firebirds court. And just on the rest of the Australian Conference, of course, the Swifts will be there and thereabouts. Vixens, I reckon, might push up. I've seen a lot of them this year, of course, being here in Melbourne, and I've liked what I've seen. But one thing that has been lacking has been they've been able to win games, but they've lacked their consistency. It looked like it was starting to get there, but then against the Thunderbirds last week, I was at that game, they did win that game, but the consistency wasn't there at all. There was no consistency at all. It was a little bit disjointed, and you need consistency if you're going to push up and win games. And we've discussed the Fever before too, Luke. Do you think the Fever will push up and make the conference finals?
I don't know. The Fever are a bit inconsistent. They tend to drop a quarter, and that's what occurred when the Fever played the Steel. In Invercargill, they dropped a quarter, and it cost them the game, simply because, for the rest of the game, the other 3 quarters, they either won each quarter or were very competitive. And look, I really enjoyed seeing the Fever play. I liked seeing Cape Beveridge play in the mid-court. And just before I move on to the New Zealand Conference, I think the conference system was the final nail in the ANZ Championship's coffin, because the way it exposed just how uncompetitive the Kiwi sides are in comparison to the Australian counterparts. I think it, removed any chance we had of preserving the competition. But just staying with the New Zealand Conference, my prediction for the Magic to win the New Zealand Conference isn't going to come up as being correct. They suffered a couple of key injuries, Leonard de Bruin and Ghost Rasmussen, which have now returned to the starting 7, but because they lack depth on the bench, those 2 players were the difference between them winning and losing games. I'm ashamed that I didn't pick the Steel to finish top of the Kiwi Conference, which they're going to do. And I think, providing they beat the Vixens and they win the rest of their home games in Invercargill, they will lose to the Firebirds and the Swifts, and they would have had a pretty good season, though, when you look how dominant the Firebirds and Swifts have been. As for the other 2 places for the finalists, I'm not 100% sure of the order, but I think it'll be Magic and the Tactic. I stand by my pre-season prediction of the Mystics missing out on the finals. I don't want to go into the Mystics and how they fared too much now, but certainly they'd be the most disappointing side in the Kiwi Conference, perhaps in the whole ANZ Championship this season. What do you think, Ben?
I agree with that. They have been very, very, very disappointing. And I was surprised also that we haven't really seen the Pulse push up more. The Pulse have sort of been, one week they've been good, one week they've been next. They sort of have been similar to what the Tactics have been in recent seasons, haven't they? They've been a bit unpredictable.
The Mystics or the Pulse?
The Pulse.
Well, the Pulse, the coach made a bad choice for their import. They should have recruited somebody like Jade Clark and beefed up their midcourt and given them a bit of steel, because some steel in the midcourt, and then they would have been able to, perhaps just win a few more games this season. The Tactic, I got to say, are the surprise of the Kiwi Conference. I had them, collecting a wooden spoon, and I think most people did, but thanks to the conference system and the way they've improved, they will make the finals, which, even if you factor in the top 3 makes the finals, it's still going to be a great achievement for that side. They're not really competitive against the Australian sides, but look, I think the Tactic are good enough to beat the Mystics again. And if they haven't played them again already, they can beat the Pulse. Whether they beat the Magic, I'm not sure, but they're good enough to make it into the finals. And that is, something to celebrate if you're a Tactic supporter, because there's been some pretty lean years, and there's probably a few years to come that will be not lean, but they won't be great. But again, once we get over that hump of the next 2 to 3 years, the Tactics should be at least better placed than they have been.
And that's what you want, because there's been a bit of a criticism in the past couple of years, Luke, to get rid of the Tactics altogether, from especially from this side of the Tasman. Anyway.
Oh yeah, and perfectly understandable. Look, between 2010 and 2015 or 16, depending on how you wish to tally it, the Tactic failed any sides that were competitive, and they were winning 1 and 2 games, maybe 3 games a season at most. So the criticisms have been very valid. I think if they hadn't taken so long to improve and get back on a competitive court, there would have been a lot less criticism, and someone like myself wouldn't have been sick of it already. But that's in the past now, and there's not going to be any games between the Australian sides and the Kiwi sides next year. So there's no need to beat up on the Tactic. They've improved a lot now, and they're positioning themselves well for the new competition.
They are, Luke. And just before we go to listeners, we're currently in the process of securing Kim Revillion to hopefully have a chat with us within the next week or so, and also Tracy Neville, the England coach. So I'm sure they'll both be worth having a chat with, Luke.
Oh, they will, and I'm looking forward to both interviews, particularly the England coach, because England is entering a rebuilding phase, and yet they've still got world-class players like Jade Clark around.
Absolutely, Luke. Agree with that, and thanks for coming on today, and I look forward to chatting again soon. Thanks, listeners.
You've been listening to the 3 Feet Radio Show with Ben Carbonaro and Luke Herbert. Tune in next time for more special guests and netball commentary exclusively on YouTube.